Donald Trump promised that he was going to bring down your egg prices, your housing prices, your energy prices. He said it was going to be so easy that he could just grab hold of the economy and then he was going to bring down your prices on day one. But what exactly has Donald Trump done at all that has brought down any prices? Instead, he's focusing on things that are going to make your life more difficult, all because he's infatuated with these things called tariffs. And now that he's actually following through with these 25% tariffs on our greatest trade partners, we are now seeing Canada and Mexico implementing reciprocal tariffs. Because this is how trade wars work. Nobody wins a trade war. Instead, consumers pay higher prices, and Donald Trump gets to tote this around as some sort of win because he's living in a conspiracy bubble where he thinks that somehow the other country pays the tariff. Now, lucky for other countries, their leadership is not as idiotic as Donald Trump. And Justin Trudeau came out and addressed these tariffs today. And I wanted to go over a few parts from what he had to say. Here he is talking about how Trump launched these tariffs against you, which is the exact correct framing. This is a self-inflicted wound by Donald Trump. He has a misunderstanding of how tariffs work. He was warned and warned and warned, and he is following through anyways. So if you guys do appreciate my work, please do remember to subscribe.
So today, the United States launched a trade war against Canada, their closest partner and ally, their closest friend. At the same time, they're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator. Make that make sense. Canadians are reasonable, and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight. Not when our country and the well-being of everyone in it is at stake. At the moment, the U.S. tariffs came into effect in the early hours of this morning, and so did the Canadian response. Canada will be implementing 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods, starting with tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods immediately, and tariffs on the remaining $125 billion of American products in 21 days' time.
They promised they were going to do this, and they really have no choice. Are they just going to play at this disadvantage all because Donald Trump is a fucking idiot? I mean, what did we expect them to do? Everybody was warning Donald Trump that this is what was going to happen. And let's all just remember how tariffs work. Tariffs are paid by the company that imports a good. So if a company needs steel or lumber and they need to buy it from a supplier in Canada, the company in the United States pays that tariff when the product is shipped into the United States. Then, the business here in America turns around and tax the price of that tariff onto the goods that they are selling because they aren't going to eat the cost. So what does that do? It raises prices all across the board. And because Donald Trump is implementing these across-the-board tariffs, we are going to see these 25% increases on a variety of different products. So everybody needs to brace themselves because things are about to get a hell of a lot more expensive. And this is all because Donald Trump has no idea what the hell he is doing. Here's Justin Trudeau talking about how Donald Trump is doing this to you. Again, perfect framing.
I want to speak first directly to the American people. We don't want this. We want to work with you as a friend and ally. And we don't want to see you hurt either. But your government has chosen to do this to you. As of this morning, markets are down, and inflation is set to rise dramatically all across your country. Your government has chosen to put American jobs at risk, at the thousands of workplaces that succeed because of materials from Canada or because of consumers in Canada, or both. They've chosen to raise costs for American consumers on everyday essential items like groceries and gas, on major purchases like cars and homes, and everything in between. They've chosen to harm American national security, impeding access to the abundant critical minerals, energy, building materials, and fertilizers that we have and that the United States needs to grow and prosper. They've chosen to launch a trade war that will, first and foremost, harm American families. They've chosen to sabotage their own agenda that was supposed to usher in a new golden age for the United States.
And how many times did we hear that promise? We're going to be entering into a new golden era, that Trump was going to bring the economy back. But instead, he is doing things like this. Instead, he is doing things that will ultimately crash the American economy. And everything he is doing is going to be either inflationary, well, it will be inflationary. You're getting rid of workers from the federal government, flooding the job market. You're trying to round up as many undocumented immigrants as possible, taking away from the labor pool. Now you're doing these tariffs that just have a direct impact on consumer pricing. And you expect that all of this is going to be honky-dory in a few months' time? I mean, Donald Trump is an absolute idiot. And we do need to reserve some fire for the MAGA base that lines up behind Donald Trump and just cheers on his every move. Most Americans do not agree with these tariffs. This is not what they had in mind when Donald Trump said he was going to build the economy back up. If you look at popular polling, public polling, you'll see that most Americans do not agree with these tariffs. That's why Justin Trudeau is trying to make it clear that we don't have anything against you. It's your commander-in-chief who is inflicting this upon you, which is the exact correct thing to say. He then goes on to address the moron-in-chief directly.
Now I want to speak directly to one specific American, Donald. In the over 8 years you and I have worked together, we've done big things. We signed a historic deal that has created record jobs and growth in both of our countries. We've done big things together on the world stage, as Canada and the US have done together for decades, for generations. And now we should be working together to ensure even greater prosperity for North Americans in a very uncertain and challenging world. Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
Now, of course, I would never agree that Donald Trump is a smart guy, but the Wall Street Journal is correct, and they have been calling Donald Trump out for these absolutely horrendous moves on tariffs. These tariffs are good for nobody. These trade wars are good for nobody, besides the elite few that might be in Donald Trump's circle that can somehow take advantage of all of this. It is about time that the American people wake up and start to realize that Donald Trump is not looking out for your everyday Americans. He doesn't care about the troops. He doesn't care about the veterans. He doesn't care about your mom, your dad, your grandpa. Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump and his billionaire buddies. That is it. He does not care if he is inflicting pain on your average American. All he cares about is his fragile little ego. And I'm sure these comments from Justin Trudeau is going to set him off on another rage bender because his ego just cannot take it. He is such a childish man. And now he is inflicting pain on his constituents, all because he lives in a conspiracy bubble and thinks that tariffs operate in a way that they just don't operate. He goes on to talk about how there's nothing that Donald Trump even was giving them to do to avoid these tariffs, which just goes to show that Donald Trump is just a bad faith actor in all of this.
I think in what President Trump said yesterday, that there is nothing Canada or Mexico can do to avoid these tariffs, underlines very clearly what I think a lot of us have suspected for a long time, that these tariffs are not specifically about fentanyl, even though that is the legal justification he must use to actually move forward with these tariffs.
So, a month ago, when Donald Trump threatened these tariffs, and then he said he was going to implement them, and then he said he was going to pause them for a month, there was reporting that Donald Trump and his team weren't even giving any clear direction as to what exactly they could actually do to stop these tariffs from taking effect. And the Trump team just set no clear guidelines or no clear path forward for them to operate in. So instead, they tried to beef up their border with whatever. They tried to, what is the right word here? They tried to make overtures towards the fentanyl crisis at the northern border, even though that's not really a huge issue. But even then, Donald Trump is whining and complaining about fentanyl, and they try to address the issue, but then he still implements the tariffs. Because Donald Trump never follows through on his word. He is not a good faith actor in these types of negotiations, if you could even call him that. Instead, he comes in there blustering about this and about that, and then at the end of the day, he just follows through with what he wants to do. Donald Trump is just a terrible, terrible leader. He is not looking out for the greater good of America. He is not looking out for the greater good of one of our greatest allies, Canada. He's just looking out for Donald Trump. And this is where it gets really dark, because I think it really does boil down to what Trudeau has to say here.
I think in terms of what he wants, I heard he talked about banking again this morning in a tweet, which doesn't make any sense, because American banks, there's about 16 American banks currently active in Canada, holding about $113 billion worth of assets in this country. So the American banks are alive and well and prospering in Canada. It's an example of not really being able to see what it is that he wants, because even the excuse that he's giving for these tariffs today of fentanyl is completely bogus, completely unjustified, completely false. So we actually have to fold back on the one thing he has said repeatedly, that what he wants is to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy, because that'll make it easier to annex us, is the second half of his thought. Now, first of all, that's never going to happen. We will never be the 51st state. But yeah, he can do damage to the Canadian economy, and he's started this morning. But he is rapidly going to find out, as American families are going to find out, that that's going to hurt people on both sides of the border.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. It will hurt Canadians, but it's also going to hurt Americans. And Americans were already complaining about the price of eggs before Donald Trump was even elected. And if you think an extra 25% in costs for the average family isn't going to rile a whole bunch of people up, I think you're mistaken. But is Trudeau right here? Is this all about trying to annex Canada, trying to make them into the 51st state? Is it really that grotesque? Does Donald Trump have some legacy issue that he's trying to solve out in his teeny little brain? Is that what he really wants to do? I mean, that's the only thing that really makes sense, right? That's the only through line in all of this. Even though he continues to talk about fentanyl and illegal immigration and yada, yada, yada. But he keeps on going back to this thought of, well, Canada should be the 51st state. He is a profoundly stupid man. And this is not how we should be treating our allies. Canada is like our little brother. They have been through it all with us. Canadians put their lives on the line during the Iran hostage crisis. They followed us into Afghanistan after 9/11. I mean, there is nothing Canada won't do to support us as Americans. And Donald Trump is just shitting all over that because he has some twisted view of what tariffs are, why they might be used, how they're going to work, and whether or not it's actually going to impact our economy. So everybody needs to brace for impact. This is going to be painful for most people in America. And while Donald Trump is down at Mar-a-Lago golfing away and, scamming his supporters with meme coins, your life is about to get a whole heck of a lot harder because Donald Trump is such a fucking idiot. So I will leave it there. If you guys got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. We've got to build something here on the left that can adequately push back against this right-wing media ecosystem that just shovels shit for Donald Trump every single day. So if you do like what I do here, please do remember to subscribe. If you want to see just how laughable it is to watch Donald Trump try to explain how these tariffs are supposed to work, go ahead and check out that video on the screen now. It is quite eye-opening, to say the least. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.